Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello there, and welcome back to my podcast. It's Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're back. You know, for many of you that have been listening to me for a long time, you know that I love to bring you the best information, honest and truthful information, because there's plenty of it out there that we have to research after we find it to find out if it was even true to form in the beginning. I want to bring you from the best minds in the industry. I've been blessed to work with amazing people, and now I'm bringing them all back again because things have changed. The industry has changed. New discoveries have happened along the way. And I think that it's going to be absolutely amazing to be able to get this information to you. Well, today is going to be one of those days, and I think you're going to be very, very excited. My guest, Jerry Angelini, is here with me today. You're going to love this. I've done many shows with Jerry over the years, and he is always a wealth of information. We're going to be talking about mushrooms today. How cool is that? Jerry is the head of education at Fungi Perfecti and Host Defense. He has a Master's of Science in Rehabilitation Counseling from Boston University and has been trained in Western herbalism, traditional Chinese medicine, and Ayurvedic medicine. In his role, Jerry collaborates extensively with the in-house Fungi Perfecti research and development team to disseminate research on beneficial mushrooms to the natural products industry. How cool is that? I want to thank him for being here today. Help me welcome my guest. Hey, Jerry.
How you doing, Jeffrey? It's really great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. You know, we've been blessed to see a lot of things changing in our industry for a long time, and it's nice that we've been around a while, so we've seen some changes. What do you think is the biggest change?
Yeah.
Not even related to the mushroom category, but biggest change in our industry over the last 10 years?
I think just the awareness of it, honestly. I mean, gosh, I started my integrative healthcare practice 35 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And back then it was like, talk about the Wild West. And that was on the East Coast too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and it was just like unknown, uncharted territory for sure. And we've seen a lot of changes, but from the last 10 years, I would say just like the acknowledgement and inclusion and awareness in the Western medical field and world that has been increasing for complementary or integrative interventions and support, and looking at supplements and dietary ingredients and food choices, and all of it has become much, much more mainstream. So it's really wonderful to see it shift and change and grow over the past, especially 10 years.
You know, as I've been in the industry a long time too, I'm going on 45 years now, and it's just been a long haul, but I love every bit of it. We started when it was very, very almost primitive.
Yes.
We had virtually no information. I lived in the library just getting enough information to be able to do a radio show.
Exactly.
And after being on the air for over 42 years, I've learned that things have changed. And I also had a little self-learning as well, that every time I thought I knew everything, I found out that I didn't. And new science and new discoveries had come about. The one thing that has been the hardest for me to teach, not only the benefits of, but also the availability and variety of mushrooms.
Yeah.
You know, because the mindset today is, I'll be doing a lecture and people say, well, I use mushrooms and I put them on my Philly steak sandwich and I put them on my pizza and I love them at the salad bar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all good.
Yes.
All good. But
Great
that's kind of not. It is, but that's not where we're going with this. If you are approaching a group for the very first time, as I have listeners that have been with me a long time, and now I have people actually seeing and listening again, maybe some new people.
Yeah.
What would be the easiest way to describe the mushroom category in supplement form today?
Yeah, It is unique and different from herbal ingredients for sure. There's a whole set of compounds that they are unique to the mushroom kingdom itself. And these compounds can't be found anywhere else. And so, because of their uniqueness, we have a little bit of a learning curve associated with it.
Mm.
So, treat these like completely new ingredients. They're not herbs, they're not vitamins, they're not minerals. They are their own distinct class of substances. And so, if you're new to mushrooms at all, approach them like, okay, I have a lot to learn, and I'm gonna dive into this and open my mind. And I think like having the beginner's mindset is going to be really helpful for people who have started to hear about mushrooms like lion's mane or reishi, and like, ooh, I've heard of it, and like, I just don't know enough. And you're right. We all don't know enough. We're all learning about these, but we have some really great data to jump off from.
And thank you for that. And I think the interesting thing is when we go around the world, there are things that we're learning about today in our country,
Yes.
here in America, that we feel is brand new
Yep.
and may have been utilized and relied on and tested, tried and true at another place in the world for 100 years to 1,000 years or
Right.
even more. We hear about it like Ayurveda, and we hear about these wonderful things that are all over the world, and to them it's just an everyday thing. And here we're jumping up and down for something we feel is brand new.
Right.
Around the world, how are mushrooms? How are they welcomed, and are they even revered in some
Yeah.
part of the world?
So it's really interesting in traditional Chinese medicine. So China, Southeast Asia, Japan, Europe, Northern Europe, Scandinavia. Mushrooms are really like they're beautiful. They're part of the culture, and not just the food culture, like cooking, whether it's morels or truffles, like you will see in France and Italy, right? Um, or things like wood ear mushroom that's really popular in Chinese cuisine, or shiitake mushroom too. Like
Mhm.
we're talking about some of the more beneficial, like health supportive ones, like reishi and chaga and cordyceps and lion's mane and maitake. These have really well established uses in traditional ethnobotanical or ethnomycological practices for health and wellness. So they have long, long histories of use. And then there are some where mushrooms are just like looked at as not being like things that they would want at all. And there is some like discussion in the past around Ayurveda, or Ayurveda, as some people call it too, right? Where like mushrooms, they might be ama or sources of um, like bad energy or energetics.
Mhm.
But then, like if you go back far enough, there are some mushrooms that are in fact used under very specific circumstances too. So there's a little bit of uncertainty in various different cultures, but um, predominantly, mushrooms have a very positive experience cross culturally. And I think a lot of what's happened in the US is we've lost our connection to those, um, like our ancestral heritage around mushrooms as just a food source. And because we don't see it often in our foods, there's been this mycophobia that's like come across. So really what we want to do is we want to recognize that you don't go out into a woods and start picking up mushrooms and eating them.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't go out into a field and just start eating anything that's green either, right? So
true,
like we got to use some common sense. Like people have got to reinvigorate common sense in their life, right?
true.
And there are these wonderful things called field guides. mycology field guides. They're amazing. They're very precise. And you take them out and you take someone who's a mycologist. Most states have like, a state mycological association. And there are very experienced mushroom hunters and mycologists that love bringing new people out into the woods and into the fields and showing them the beautiful world of mycology and helping them figure out how to identify our friendly mushrooms and distinguish them from our not so friendly mushrooms, right? So, I think there is this resurgence that's going on in America for sure. But I think we just have to kind of move ourselves out of that experience of like, oh, mushrooms, they kill people. It's like, well, a lot of things kill people,
Absolutely.
right?
When I was raised in the Midwest in Michigan, and mushrooms were things that we would go get every
Yeah,
year.
yeah,
And I learned what button mushrooms were. I learned what morels were. I
yep,
learned what hen of the woods was.
yep,
These are things we picked by the bushels. You cleaned, you prepared them,
yep,
and you had mushrooms all year long.
yep,
Interestingly enough to me, once I was in the industry, I was starting to understand more about mushrooms. And when I really started taking a look at them, some of these mushrooms don't even look like your traditional mindset of what a mushroom would
I
be.
don't.
Some of them have the most unique, just
Yes,
distinct looks,
yes,
and it would be something you might walk right by
yes,
without those mycologists taking you on a nature walk. I've
right,
I've done a lot of those nature walks, and
yeah,
to find these things in cultures like in Washington and Oregon and all those areas up there and other parts of the country, I've learned that these things grow around us. They grow in harmony with us, but many times we walk right by them. They will say, we don't take time to smell the flowers. I think we don't take time to appreciate the mushrooms.
yeah, we don't. And they're a critical part of our ecosystem, right? They're what are
Hmm.
called decomposers. Even the ones that we eat, right? They're decomposers. And what they do is they take cellulose and carbon and lignin and they break it down and turn it into topsoil. So the reason we have topsoil is because we have these fungal decomposers that take leaf litter and branches and the bodies of insects and animals and whatnot, and these fungal species, they decompose them and they reintroduce that carbon and they put
Hmm.
it into what are called carbon sinks. They create topsoil, they liberate nutrients, they distribute nutrients. They're just really important, what they call keystone species, right, in ecosystems, right?
Yeah, there you
And
go.
as we grow further and further away from our natural environment and more of us are in cities, we have to look really carefully for them because there's a lot of asphalt and cement that we got to work around. But even like I was, I moved to San Diego about five or so years ago, and prior to that, I was living in the Northeast, and in the middle of a parking lot, a tree had been cut down, so surrounded by asphalt, and there growing out of that tree stump was a set of reishi mushrooms. And I was just like, you go there, you go girl, like you're doing the greatest thing in the world, and like you are
Unbelievable.
doing exactly what you need to be doing. And it was just wonderful to see. It's like seeing those little flowers that pop up in the middle of right of concrete. It's just like, okay, this is the world,
Survivalists.
right? So yeah, I mean, the ones that we talk about mostly in supplementation, they don't really look like a button mushroom.
No.
Like most of the polypores, that's a certain kind of mushroom, and it means that many pores. And if you flip over a reishi mushroom on the underside, there's just hundreds and hundreds of these tiny, tiny pores, and that's where all of the spores come out so that they can reproduce, right? But it doesn't really look like your white button mushroom. Doesn't
No.
even look like a shiitake mushroom. It looks very distinctly different. So yeah, there's lots that we can learn and find out, and if we just have that open mind and we go through things in a thoughtful manner and we use some common sense and you
And
know
respect for the earth.
yeah, yeah, and fall back on the wisdom of our elders and people that may not be older than us, but still just know a heck of a lot more about mushrooms than we do. So,
Well, let me ask you a question. So, if people are thinking about this, companies that are bringing these wonderful supplements to us, they're not always going out in the wild and looking for this. Are many of them are doing them in-house
yeah.
now, and is that something just because it's reliable and being out in nature may not be as reliable?
So these are really important questions. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes and really break this down. So
Perfect.
um, the demand for mushrooms is growing worldwide, not just in the US, but worldwide. And most of these beneficial mushroom species take a long time to grow. They have to establish them in their habitat, and then they have to create this fruit body once their mycelium or their root structure gets established in their environment. And that can take a while. It can take a year, a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years. It just depends on the species of mushroom. Like the chaga mushroom takes a solid 5 to 10 years to be established enough to create that conch that's growing out of that tree. The agarikon mushroom, we really don't know how long it takes. But we hypothesize that it takes a couple of decades before it
Oh my
starts
goodness.
growing that fruit body. So from from our perspective at Host Defense and my perspective as just as an herbalist and integrative healthcare practitioner for years that has a strong sense of the ecosystem, uh, fruit body cultivation is problematic for a couple of different reasons. Wild crafting mushrooms, really, we can't do it on an industrial level.
Okay.
We would clear cut all of the mushroom forests in the world in a matter of a decade if we were to do that. And we're starting to see the effects of some of that with some of the more challenged mushroom species like chaga. Although there's a really nice, I would say, um, like established base of chaga in the northeastern United States and in Canada. When you start looking at it in other countries that have harvested chaga for longer periods of time, we're starting to see that it is more and more difficult to find
I see.
those wild specimens. So we have to come up with a better approach. Um, some people think that cultivating them in a controlled environment for those fruit bodies is a better option, and it is absolutely a better option than wild harvesting from my perspective. But
Okay.
there's also another couple of options that I think have even greater longevity and sustainability associated with them, and that's with growing these mushrooms in an edible substrate, something that we can grow from year to year and that we can grow in a sustainable manner. And in a regenerative manner too, if we even want to go that far to regenerative agriculture, right? So the challenges with wild harvesting fruit bodies of some of these beneficial mushrooms like reishi and chaga and lion's mane and whatnot is just how much is out there, how long it takes for them to come forward and for you to harvest them. But then you also have a concern with something that's called endotoxin contamination. So big word there, endotoxin. Woo, that sounds bad. And it's it's okay for most people. So most of us have a fairly intact intestinal tract, right? And so when you eat something that's out in the wild, there's all kinds of microbiomes out there, right? And most of them are probiotic, but there's always going to be some pathogens like E. coli or Clostridium or C. difficile, so and there's all those things out there, right? We take things in from the wild, we cook them, it usually kills all that stuff, right? And then we ingest it, right? And so, great, that's supposed to be really good for us, right? But for some of us, what's left after we cook or sterilize a substance can still be problematic. And this is where things get a little bit tricky, so I'm going to like break it down a little bit more. When you sterilize something, if there are microbes that are pathogens in there, like E. coli, it's dead. But those cell membranes persist post-sterilization. And for a growing group of individuals, even that exposure sets off a really inflammatory immune response in their intestinal tract. And we're noticing this growing number of people that are just like their intestinal systems are just more reactive. And so when we're looking at creating a safe and sustainable supplement, we need to start taking these considerations into our thought process and our planning process for the longevity of the industry, right? Because we know mushrooms are really supportive in a huge number of ways, and we want to make sure that they're still there for people 10 years down the road, and we want to make sure that they do no harm, right? That's your first tenet of any kind of like medicine or health promoting. First, do no harm, right?
Hippocrates.
Hippocrates, right? If you look back a long way, right? So what we want to make sure is that as we're working with a greater and greater number of people with these kinds of sensitivities, that our products are super safe. So that's one thing. Now, some people will get into the, do we do the fruit bodies? We do the mycelium? And, at Host Defense, we have a very inclusive approach. It's not either or, it's both. Or maybe it's, when do I use the mycelium and when do I use the fruit body? When do I use a capsule or a powder? When do I use a liquid extract? So it's not about like one is better than the other. It's more, when should I use what? And this is we want to like decrease some of the like extremists perspective on this, because we're learning so much about all of these substances with greater and greater research that occurs. So like if we were to just fall upon the 2,000 years of clinical data, that gives us a very, very narrow view into how mushrooms can be helpful to us. If we start including all of this really diverse research we have on mushrooms, like we start to see that there's like so much good stuff in here. So we want to make sure that people keep an open mind about this as well.
The other thing is, a lot of people that are starting to tiptoe through the mushroom kind of industry, and they've been on supplements a long time. They're opening up the door. This question comes up a lot, and I just was wondering about your perspective. Do you feel that individual mushrooms taken individually is more effective than using a blended formulated combination? I know how I feel, but I'm curious what
Yeah.
you think.
Yeah, they're different for sure. So, like individual mushroom species, they really do have their range of activity. And,
Mhm.
um, when you're taking just one thing, and let's say you take it on an empty stomach, your body spends a lot of attention on it, right? But if you take a formula of maybe 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 17 mushrooms,
Mhm.
even if you take it on an empty stomach, that's a lot of data that's coming into your intestinal tract,
Okay, I love
right?
that.
And what we've actually found is that there does appear to be synergy. So with more complex formulas, the immune system appears to increase its engagement and recruitment processes
Huh.
more strongly than if you take just one mushroom. So that complexity signals our immune response that, it really needs to get itself going. There's a lot going on here. We really need to pay attention. We need to get engaged now, right? So that's a really important consideration when we want to work with different people, right? So some people who are really sensitive to things, right? Like they're the ones that come in, and I lovingly refer to them as canaries in the coal mine, right? Because they're the ones that are like, oh no, I felt that at 5:52, which was 23 minutes after I took it. And they're like, okay, great. Like, your observational skills are amazing. We're going to go with those, right? And we're going to recognize that your awareness of your body is so precise that we have to dial in our awareness too. And I find that for those people, single mushroom always do the best because it's not too much information. I start really low. Maybe I'll start with a half a capsule with them, like, and just be like, let's do that for a week and tell me how you do. And they will like text me like 45 minutes after they take a capsule. Oh, I felt it. And it felt like this. And if I'm like, perfect, we're on the right track. And then after a week, once they get used to that, then I might have them take another capsule. So they're up to what we would call a gram, right?
Got it.
So, and that's for those really sensitive and perceptive people, that's great. Other people are like, no, I need a lot. Like, I really want to get my immune system up and running. Like, I work with like 500 people a day. Like, I am constantly engaged in, like, I'm on, public transportation, right? And I'm like, we have this really wonderful formula called Stamid 7. It's 7 amazing formulas that help your whole body and support like just about everything in your body's health and wellness. And like the research that we have, preliminary, but it's a good jumping off point, right? Tells us it's maybe like synergistic and may in fact benefit your immunity more than just one mushroom at the same amount. So I would go in that direction with them. So again, if you notice, it's not good, bad, it's when to use what.
Over the years, it's taken me a while to kind of find my combination, but
Right.
I take the Stamets 7,
Yeah.
but I also take, due to my family history, I take lion's mane, I
Yep.
take reishi, I take agaricus, I take cordyceps, and I take
Yeah.
maitake. So
You've
I
got
take,
'em.
I know. Welcome to my world.
Yeah,
Every
right.
time I try to cut things back, I add
I know,
3
right.
more.
Yeah, I
So
know.
I do those separately, but then I do the Stamets 7, and it has made an absolutely dramatic difference. And I started out listening to my body one at a time.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't throw them all in, even though I'm that one that says I need a whole bunch of it.
Yeah.
But I started individually, and it's taken me years to find this workable combination. And I like the lion's mane beverages too. So I
They're
mean,
really
I love them. So I mean, this has been and has become a very, very important sector.
Yeah.
And to your point before, you said sometimes we do better to do things in a harmonious blend than maybe single. Maybe the mentality would be like just taking like a B12 versus like a whole B complex.
Exactly.
So I think that we learn, but we have to listen to our bodies. Our bodies do talk. We just
Oh.
usually don't listen.
Yeah. And that's why, like, we've worked really hard at maintaining single mushroom species and delivery formats for that. Like, you want to take a liquid reishi with the mycelium and the fruit body? Great. Our liquid reishi is brilliant. You just want to take a capsule because you don't like the taste of the mushrooms or the alcohol is like off-putting for you. Great. Do you want that in a capsule or a powder? We got both. So whichever
There you
works
go.
for you, right? You want to breath, like a throat spray, like we got those 5 flavors. Amazing. Like,
Yes, you do.
like so, but we also have these blends that also include our botanical friends and allies too, right? And one of my favorite is the brain and body blend, right? And that's got
Love that.
reishi and lion's mane. So the brain, and it supports like that immune balancing and modulatory activity for those 2 mushrooms, and then turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, and just a teeny bit of black pepper. And it's like turmeric chai with mushrooms, and it's just delightful. And it supports like, graceful joint movement. It supports glycemic balance. It supports nerve regenerative activity, like just that day-to-day nerve regenerative activity that we're doing all the time, right? It supports gut health and like the intestinal lining itself. It supports your brain and nerve conduction. I mean, it's just a really great and like great tasting powder. And the way I love to take it is I have some chocolate almond milk and I put my scoop of brain and body in. I think it's a teaspoon, maybe a little bit more than a teaspoon, right?
Of
And
course.
I put
Of
it in
course.
chocolate almond milk and I, just mix it up and it's like chocolate chai in the morning. It's a delightful way to start the day.
I've had people over the years, obviously, you and I have had tens of thousands of, I've literally had over 20,000 radio shows over the
Yeah,
years. I've
yeah,
had tens of thousands of meetings and one-on-ones.
yeah,
But you get to know people,
yeah.
and there are people that will take a blended combination because they won't take two individual things,
Nope.
but they will take a blend. And I think to
Yep.
myself, if I have my druthers, I'm going to recommend my community, or I'm going to recommend the Stammet 7. And the
Right,
reason I'm going to do it is because I know they will not take more than one thing at a time.
right.
And I think they're getting more bang for their buck and more success on their journey
Yeah,
sometimes if they're using a synergistic blended combination.
yeah. And it's true. And it's because, like, the person that you're working with, and you
True.
can help kind of steer them in the direction that's going to be best for them. And that takes skill, like that takes a lot of experience. It takes like knowing the person that's sitting or standing in front of you so that you
True.
can say, you know like, here's what I would consider for you, and it's because I know that, like, you're not going to take 10 pills. Like, that's not happening for you, right?
No.
Like, you're going to take one, maybe two, if I can, like, really twist your arm about this, right? But then, like, we want to make sure that they're going to do something that's going to, like, they're going to feel, and that's going to be within what they can manage, because sometimes those capsules are really huge and people just hate swallowing capsules, and I get it. I mean, that's why I've like gone to like a lot of our powders lately, because it's easier to make my shake in the morning and just like, I just put it in a little bottle and I shake it up, and then I drink it and it's good to go, right?
Mhm.
But like we have like the coffee with the lion's mane in it. So you get your coffee, you get a little bit of caffeine, not too much either. It's only about 38 milligrams of caffeine in one of our coffee packets. And then you get 1,400 milligrams of lion's mane. And it does not taste like mushrooms. Like, this
No,
is
it
the thing
doesn't.
that I gotta let people know here. It tastes like coffee. And, there's a little bit of stuff that's like floating in the bottom. Just swirl it around and throw it back. You won't even notice by the end of it. And you taste the coffee. It's delish too, right? So, like, it's one of those, like, we're trying to make things easier for people because we all have really hectic and busy and confusing lives. So let's try and make things as easy as possible and as accessible as possible for people too.
During the pandemic, I was traveling, of course. Um, and I
Yep.
stopped at a little restaurant in Arizona, and it was like a vegan, vegetarian, Asian restaurant. And I knocked on the door, and there was no one there. And I said, "Are you open?" And she says, "Please, come in." I guess there's been nobody, I guess.
Yeah.
So I sat down with her, and she says, "Would you like to try something?" And I'm like, "All right." So she brings me out this plate, and it's got these little white cubes on it. It looked like it was in a butter sauce and some garlic and stuff. So I took a bite, and I said, "You guys serve lobster here?" She goes, "No, that's lion's mane." And I said, "No,
Right.
it's not." And she goes, "Yes, it is." And I mean,
Right.
I loved it. So
Yeah.
she did like lion's mane pot stickers.
Yeah.
She did
Yeah.
lion's mane tacos for
Yeah.
me. I fell in love with it at that
Yeah.
point because I mean, I do shiitakes, I do all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I mean, many of these mushrooms that give us these nutritional support in our health and well-being, they're not always mushrooms you want to eat in the food form.
Right. Yeah. So some are edible, what we would
Right.
consider edible, some are not. Like, so
Hmm.
reishi and chaga and cordyceps, I wouldn't put them in the edible
No, me neither.
category. Like lion's mane, though, shiitake, maitake, these are really delicious and
They are.
choice edible mushrooms. So just definitely things like I love to cook lion's mane, and it comes in this like globulous, almost brain-looking kind of a thing.
Like a
Not to gross
cloud,
people
like
out.
a
Like
cloud.
a cloud there, or a white pom-pom. Think about that. And I slice them into these, thin-ish steaks, and then I saute them until they
Mm,
turn brown, and then I'll throw on some like either miso or tamari
mm.
sauce, and they're delicious. So,
Yes.
and they're hearty too, so like you really feel like, oh yeah, this is fulfilling for sure. um so like those edibles, like you can find them just about anywhere nowadays. Well, it depends. Like, so like in California, I can find them just about anywhere nowadays.
Okay, there you
Maybe
go.
not so much in other parts of the country, but they are becoming more and more popular as people learn about some of the benefits. And lion's mane definitely has like a huge popularity because of just the research that supports its beneficial impact on cognitive functioning, memory, mood, and it's just we can all use a little bit of help around that nowadays. That's for sure.
Quick question for you before
Yeah.
we have to kind of tie this up here. Are you ever too old to start bringing in these mushrooms to your regimen?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think whenever you bring them in, that is great. What we have found is that even with elders, they benefit. The human clinical trials, a couple of them on lion's mane, one in particular looked at 50 to 80-year-old individuals, and after 2 weeks of taking lion's mane supplementation, they had significant increases in cognitive functioning, memory, and mood. And it got better the longer they took it. It was a 16-week trial, so like we couldn't see what happened after a year, but after 3 months, there was still improvement for cognitive functioning, memory, and mood. And
That's
I like
great.
to remind people that it's food, so like we don't have to worry about, oh, can I eat this every day? I mean, I don't know, can you have salad every day? Can you have can you have oatmeal every day? Can you have sure, it's food, right? So the only thing that you want to be careful about with mushrooms is if you're allergic to them, right? So if you're allergic to mushrooms, and being allergic to one kind of mushroom doesn't mean you're allergic to all of them. You want to
Good point.
work with your doctor to figure out how extensive is your particular mushroom allergy or intolerance, if you have one. It's very rare, though. Most people do not have that. So most people respond really well. And the other question is, well, what about candida? And like, what if and for those of you that don't know, candida is, it's a pathogenic yeast, and it's not the same thing at all. And if people have concerns about that, you definitely want to work with your integrative healthcare practitioner, but you also want to recognize that many of the mushrooms that we consume beneficially, like lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, maitake, they support the proliferation of our probiotic microflora in our intestinal tract. So they help your body feed all of our friendly microflora. So this is really important. So it's really wonderful and safe to take.
So let's end this today because I'm hoping you'll come back and see me again.
Yeah.
I hope you will. And I would like you to leave everybody with a thought for the day. It could be on this, it could be on anything in the health field, but a thought from you for the day.
Oh, kindness, unrecognized and secret kindnesses benefit us as much, if not more, than they benefit the recipient of our kindness.
That's beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, Jerry Angelini, for being here. It's always great to see you. I've been
Great
blessed
to
to
see
work
you
with
too.
you in the past, and here we are doing something on a new platform. Remember, everybody, make sure that you bring all your friends. This is a platform to get us healthy so we can be healthy and we can stay healthy. And it's all about information and honest to truthful information. And that's what we're going to bring you here on the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're here today. My thanks to Jerry Angelini. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Be well, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.